Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Perspective. I'm your host, Umar Khalid. But we're going to talk about a very pertinent topic to Pakistan, also to the world, but Pakistan definitely, and that is climate change. Climate change is something that we've been talking about in previous shows over the past few months and years, but now it is shaping more and more into a reality for developing countries, especially such as Pakistan, that is most vulnerable to this effect. We've seen the changes coming about in the last few days with the melting of the glaciers in Gilgit-Baltistan that has caused a huge havoc for the people of the regions. Of late, the latest development being the Shishpa Glacier melting, which has caused the glacial lake outburst flood, or GLOF as we speak, which has caused also one of the bridges to collapse in Hunza, and this is just the beginning. A lot of apprehensions come from people as far as what the climate change means. A lot of people don't care what climate change means. In fact, this is the time when you need to put as much of attention and concentration on this very important issue as we can. The whole community, whether it be the public sector, the private sector, the government is doing that. The government is trying its level best, but it's also up to us, the people and the private sector, to do whatever we can in order to deviate or reduce some of the effects, because we are seeing the rapid industrialization, we are seeing the increased amount of heat. We have just seen the difference between this year and last year when the heat wave wasn't as intense as this year, just because of the industrialization that has again come into effect and the industries that have started working again. This is something that needs to be taken into consideration before it's way too late. We have a huge panel today to talk about climate change, the economics of climate change, the effects of climate change, what are the reasons of climate change, what are the different factors that aggravate climate change, and what needs to be done now by different factions of the society. We've been joined by two guests here in the studios and two guests online. Let me introduce my studio guest first of all, then we'll go to our online guest. In the studios, I've been joined by Shakil Ahmed Rami Sahab on my very right. Shakil Ahmed Rami Sahab is a dear economist and a regular guest on our shows. Shakil, it's wonderful to have you here, and as we say, Guzishta Eid Mubarak to you and your family as well. Next is Munir Ahmed Sahab. He's an environmentalist, a person who understands climate change and the environment much more than any of us do. Munir Sahab, thank you very much to have joined us, and Eid Mubarak to you and family as well. Guzishta, nevertheless. Online, we've been joined by two guests as well. Let me introduce them to you one by one. Our first guest is Ali Tawqir Sheikh. He is the CEO of Lead Pakistan. Ali Tawqir Sheikh Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. And then we've got Shafqat Aziz Saab. He's a communication specialist with the Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund. Shafqat Aziz Saab, it's a pleasure to have you on our show here for this very important topic, and that is climate change. Let's begin with my guests in the studio. When we talk any change, any effect that the government has or the government does or the people are subjected to, the first things that comes to mind is what are the economic implications of it? How much money can we spend on it? How much is our economy going to be impacted on it? Climate change, Shakil Saab, is something that is a reality, and that has been a reality since so many years. Pakistan has tried in the last few years as well to do whatever it can. Is it enough? And how is our economy going to be affected by these effects of the climate change that we are seeing now, right now, in, for example, Gilgit-Baltistan?
Thank you, Umar. First of all, let's be clear. Climate change is not an environmental problem. It is a development problem. It is a security problem. If you look at on security dimensions, so United Nations Security Council has passed a resolution on that. So it's a security threat. Look at the leading intelligence agencies of the world, they have created dedicated departments. Then it is a development issue, because it is directly related to the livelihoods and the life of the people. And it requires immense resources right now to overcome these challenges. I just give you one figure. In 2016, McKinsey Institute, they came up with a figure. So there would be the gap of investment till 2030 of 5.3 trillion US dollar. What? 5.3 trillion US dollar. If we include sustainable development goals needs, it would be 3 times more. That's been $15.9 trillion. In development goals, climate change and environment development, they are the major, are the leading factors for the future. So that is very clear. The economic resources, we require a lot of resources, one thing. And second thing, we have to look at that our policy framework in Pakistan. Either we are investing on the right places, our prioritization list is right, are we just trying to do go for just where we get some fame or something like that, we are investing there.
Is it temporary or is it a long-term solution that we are really looking at? Munir Saab, resources, policy framework, these are two things that you understand very well when it comes to climate change and Pakistan. Do you feel enough has been done? Do you feel more needs to be done? The changes that we are seeing right now, as far as, for example, I'm just giving an example, Gilgit-Baltistan, was this already predicted by the government, by your organization, by people such as yourselves, and if so, are there any measures that will be put into place?
First of all, as you talk about policy frameworks, we have policy frameworks. And we have several international commitments signed, and we are trying to oblige with different plan of action, but that is not sufficient. And second thing, you asked about resources. Definitely, we lack resources, and whatever meager resources we have, they are not invested in the right direction. As you just mentioned about GLOF, we are having a multi-million-dollar GLOF project in Pakistan, and they have a huge agenda of implementation plans to safeguard communities and infrastructure of Gilgit-Baltistan, and they have plans for different valleys as well, valley development programs to protect communities. Despite all the interventions that we have, the investments that we have, that policy frameworks that we have, unfortunately, we are not coping with the challenge that we are confronting communities. And
we are not coping, or we are not coping enough, Munir Saab?
We are not coping enough.
All right.
And I don't know where the fault is, but unfortunately, the investments are not working.
All right.
And we have to see what causes are the failure of getting the required targets and the results that we definitely need to. Perhaps we could not engage communities in our awareness programs or in the implementation phase as well. And perhaps we cannot have a larger engagement of communities in the community-based resilience and disaster management.
All right.
So we are lacking something. Because like in the mountain areas, we have seen a massive destruction as well, despite all the measures. The billion tree tsunami and engaging governments and spending a lot of money over there. From the federal government giving a lot of grants to the provinces.
All right.
And clean green movement Pakistan and wildlife policies. So many things that we have tried out, but still we see the result is not.
It's not enough. This is what you're saying, that
enough.
The results are not.
The results are not that encouraging.
The results are not that encouraging. We've also been joined by another guest, Ghulam Rasool Saab, former DG Met. Ghulam Rasool Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Ghulam Rasool Saab, you've just heard what our two guests have been saying as far as, climate change, whether it be in Pakistan or across the world. But let's concentrate on Pakistan for the moment. We are seeing the glaciers melting in Gilgit-Baltistan. We are seeing the increase in temperatures in Pakistan. We see the environmental pollution in Karachi and Lahore. Has the government done enough? Is more needed to be done, and if so, which are the areas that, and how should that change be brought about so as to alleviate the effects of climate change?
Thank you very much, Umar. We update you about the recent events of climate change in Pakistan. March and April witnessed that these are the hottest March and April during the last 6 years. So this was like unusual,
Ghulam Rasool sir, we are having certain issues as far as your voice is concerned. We are going to come back to you, but in the meantime, let's go directly to Shafqat Aziz Saab, Communication Specialist, Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund. Shafqat Aziz Saab, I'd like to have your point of view as far as the resources allocated for climate change and the alleviation of the effects of climate change are concerned. You've, if I understand well, worked quite diligently in that sector as well. What more needs to be done? Why is Pakistan not be able to tackle this huge crisis that is emanating out of climate change?
Thank you, Umar. First of all, you are having such a galaxy in your studio. Shakil Saab and Munir Saab are there, and after speaking after them, it's really huge challenge. However, but Munir Saab has already said that what we are lacking is not, of course, there are some policy issues, and we need more robust policies, especially adaptation and mitigation side. However, the community lacking really support that they need, and they also lacking the necessary awareness to deal with this. This issue is not an isolated issue. It is already, as our guest has indicated, that it is a multi-sectoral issue, and your agriculture, your livelihood, your everything is connected with climate change phenomena. Since we are being PPF is it's one of the largest mechanism outreach across Pakistan, and we are working in 147 districts across Pakistan, and from coastal areas to Gilgit-Baltistan, and from Gwadar to AJK. What we have witnessed and what we have observed, that we need local solutions, and every locality, every community has their own kind of climate change issues, and we cannot suggest a same solution to a community living in a coastal area, to a community living in a desert area of Pakistan. So hence we need local adaptation plans. We need to work with local. mm, of course,
Right,
unfortunately, we
Shafqat
don't
Saab,
have.
this is something that I'd like to understand as well. You know, working with the local community is something that the governments understand very well, and it's nothing new working with the local communities or working with the people on board, and that every single region of Pakistan, maybe or across the world, has different issues when it comes to the effects mitigating out of the climate change. Nevertheless, what is really lacking, because I understand well that the people are being put into consideration, that they are being talked about with the public sector. I mean, there are consultations as well, but is that enough? I mean, I don't understand where we lack. I'd like your point of view on that.
Yes, yeah. Climate financing, I think, is the aspect that we are really lacking behind. We are lagging behind. For example, for instance, if we need climate resilient agriculture, we need support to our farmers. We need capacity building for farmers on modern agriculture techniques, and same is about now being again. I will mention we have enable local communities to use clean and green energy. We supported them with small infrastructures like hydrocarbon power generation plants. So their dependence on natural resources has reduced, and it is resulting into a positive, not only positive impact on their health. Their women are now are more empowered, and now they are less tree cuttings in those areas where we have introduced these plants. So we could only create some models of self-sustainability, but climate financing is need at massive level, at broader level, at bigger level, and so that same could be replicated, same solutions would be
All right.
replicated in
Solutions that need to be
different parts of the
replicated,
world.
models of sustainability. This is what you are trying to give us as solutions. Shafqat Aziz Saab, Ali Taqi Sheikh Saab, if you could kindly turn on the light in your environment, we can't see you properly. There's a lot of darkness. If you could just give us a bit of light and enlighten us at the same time. As far as the the sustainability models are concerned, when it concerns climate change, do you feel sustainability models also are different for different communities in Pakistan, or are they similar? If they are similar, how easy or difficult is their application? And if their application is easy, how long can it take before we can see some real changes?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your question and thank you for inviting me. First, a correction. I'm a former CEO of LEAD, and that was several years ago.
All right.
As for your question, I really don't know what you're trying to ask me, but assume for a moment that you're asking that there are different models and there are different variants of approaches. Yes. But if I connect with some of the earlier questions that you asked, and I think my colleagues have already given you sufficient reason, I just want to add one small point. The reason for our limited success is that we don't know what we want to do. We want to do everything for which donors provide us the financing. My colleague from PPF was just saying financing as an issue, and I think that's a bogus issue. There's a lot of financing. We don't have the spending capacity. Munir Saab mentioned a project dealing with gloves, but we did not undertake an assessment of the strength of climate resilience of the bridges, and therefore the bridge collapsed. We don't know what to do. We are at a loss. We are only here to touch the surface of the water with our toes. The real issue is that we want to ensure that the livelihood options of people are there and they are not compromised. And one way to do that is not to play a victim card that Pakistan is a very vulnerable country. Pakistan is a vulnerable country, but it's not one of the most vulnerable countries. Pakistan is one of the most vulnerable countries because we don't spend any resources on resilience. We, we have a several $1 million worth of project in northern areas for gloves, but we have not spent a dime to assess the strategic strength of the infrastructure in that area. Instead, we have spent a lot of money on four-wheel drives and to get the air conditioners for the minister saab or whatever you have. So the second point is where is the continuity of policy? If the previous government had a 10 billion trees tsunami project, it should have been clear in its documentation before any issues about corruption are raised. Once the issues of corruption are raised, then there is a discontinuity. So therefore, we need to document our actions, be it a small non-profit like PPF or the government of Pakistan in one province or the other. We need to ensure continuity in protecting our ecosystems in coastal areas, in mountainous areas, the deserts of Tharpakar and elsewhere. And our major concerns are heat waves, droughts, droughts, and food insecurity, whereby it's resulting in stunting and malnutrition. While we are giving free water to rich farmers, our people do not have sufficient money in their budgets for health and education. Therefore, all the investment in large infrastructure, such as dams, have to be supported through cost recovery mechanisms. We cannot keep on spending our money, taxpayers' money, on subsidies. Therefore, my small intervention is in this function is to ensure that we are clear-headed, there is continuity, there is accountability, and we set our priorities that are based on climate justice. Thank you.
Being clear-headed and of course being accountable and being clear, trying to put things right as far as different aspects of the changes that climate change has brought about in our daily lives, in our infrastructure, as far as the people's lives are concerned, whether it be in the deserts of Thar, as you said, or in the mountains of Gilgit-Baltistan. On the one hand, it might be a tall task, but on the other hand, it can be easily done if there is a will of the people, if there is a continuity, as you talked about. This continuity, I think, is very important as far as policies are concerned from one
Absolutely.
government to the other. And that continuity needs to be perpetrated by all the other organizations that support this mechanism for the people, for the betterment of the
Absolutely.
people and for the infrastructure. How can such a mechanism be put into action? Because we see with times, with changes that happen in the political structure, that changes also occur, and it takes time for the new government or the new sector to kind of come back to where it had started some years back.
It is, thank you very much for understanding. I think it is an excellent question that you have asked. In fact, what I want to say is that a series of projects that are not connected with each other cannot give us climate resilience. That is not adaptation. That will enhance our vulnerability and poverty, and it will reduce our per capita income and increase damages from extreme weather events through climate change. I think most important thing for us is have a transformational change. We need to know that this is an existential threat. We need to know that the water quantity is decreasing on per capita basis, and the population is increasing, and therefore by 2050 or 2047 we will need to produce twice as much food with half the water available for twice as many people. Now, that's the level of challenge, and that requires systematic thinking and transformational change. It's not a small project in one community or another project in another community. Somewhere it's UNDP and another place it's some other donor. I think government of Pakistan need to have a strategic vision, and this is a good time. This is a good time because it's a crisis situation, and there are 10, 11 parties in one government. That's a very vulnerable government. They may not be able to pass any legislation, but it is a good opportunity for them to have a joint document on climate responses that any party that wins the election commits to follow through. And that transition for transformational change, if signed by all political parties that are in the government, and hopefully those who are in the opposition these days, ensure continuity of our policies.
All right,
And
all right.
that can be
I think that's a
done.
very
That
important
can be
point, Tawqir
done,
Saab.
I think.
That is a very
Thank
important point, Tawqir Saab. We've also been joined by Momi Salim. She's an environmentalist and an analyst as well. Momi Salim, thank you very much to have joined us. We've already talked to you in this very studio on environment, on climate change, and Murisa was also there. A lot has changed since then. A lot has changed not for the better. We see what is happening in Gilgit-Baltistan. We are also seeing what is happening across the world. We are seeing the increase in temperatures. Just compare this very month last year to this year, and we are seeing a difference of 6 to 8 degrees in different areas of Pakistan. Then we have the different other effects of climate change. Then the water scarcity, that is going to be a real issue for countries such as Pakistan. How can we tackle these multiple problems?
Yeah, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me again. Yes, I was listening to Tawqir Saab, and I think continuity of policy is very, very important. Whatever actions are outlined or whatever policy or framework is, drafted should be accepted by all political parties, because unfortunately we have seen that there is always, with the change of government, there is always a hurdle in implementation of what is previously done. So as a country which is faced by this kind of vulnerability, we need to kind of, first of all, really have this, continuity in the policy. Apart from that, of course, we need to have adaptation, and unfortunately, we have not been able to kind of have a very good, framework. There was national adaptation plan that was supposed to be made. We don't have that in place. So I think some of these things are to be done at the policy level, but at the same time, there's also a need to make community aware, because many people who are facing these challenges are not even aware of what's going on around. They might be facing challenges with regards to, change of rain patterns or weather patterns or maybe the lack of nutrients in the soil, but they might not be aware of what's happening, because we all know that largely, the population which is associated to agriculture are not, of course, educated to that level where they can understand or decipher as to what's happening around them. So it's very important that we build their capacity. And the third thing that I always say is to really involve youth bulge, which we have in our country. 60% of people are young. And one of the things that even globally everybody advocates is the innovation. And we need to have eco-innovation in place in order to, tackle these challenges. Unless we have the technology indigenously, framed, we won't be able to kind of challenge, face this challenge or cope with this challenge. So we have youth bulge. Universities are places where we can do that, and previous government has, started this green youth movement. I hope that continues because there we have small grants for young people to, bring eco-innovation for challenges around our natural resources.
But Momi, when you look at the multitude of problems that are connected to climate change and its adverse effects on the community, and of course Pakistan being one of the countries that we are seeing those changes in, and with every passing month there is something new that happens, whether it be environmental pollution that increases, whether it be the heat wave that engulfs Pakistan, whether it be the glaciers that melt because of the heat wave, whether it be the effects of those glaciers melting such as floods and bridges collapsing, and the other subsequent effects of that on the community and on the economy. If we have to go step by step in order to curtail the effects, what should be the first 3 steps that need to be taken?
Yes, it would be at the expense of repeating myself. But I think that, really a comprehensive policy where we are able to spell out mitigation actions as well as adaptation actions. Because right now we are mostly, if you look at our policies, we are talking about mitigation. And Pakistan is not a bigger contributor to the problem of climate change. So we should be able to start adapting. And we need to kind of find ways, especially because our economy is based on natural resources. Because we are largely agrarian society. So it's very important for us to first secure our food and food basket and also agriculture. Obviously, it also contributes to a lot of other products as well. So I think the first thing that we need to do is towards a good framework, which is holistic, but more towards adaptation. And then I think, we cannot just say one step and then the other. There has to be a simultaneous thing as well, because, educating people and spreading awareness is one way, because the local wisdom is also very important when it comes to climate change, because local communities do have a lot of knowledge in terms of how to cope with the changing environment. And here I would like to say one thing. You mentioned pollution. Another thing where awareness is important is also the fact that Pakistan's Environment Protection Index is very low. See, there is a difference between environment and climate change. Climate change is a global problem, but environmental degradation is a very local problem. And there you need to make people aware that their actions are having adverse impact on the environment. And when the environment degrades, then climate change exacerbates it further. So, for example, if the water table is depleting because of our, use, which is not, which does not promote conservation, then of course it is going to climate change is going to exacerbate that depletion. Likewise for other natural resources as well. So it's very important for us to make people aware. The difference between environment and climate change is very important, but also how actions of local people or action of an ordinary citizen is important when it comes to environmental degradation.
All right. Thank you very much, Mohammed Salim. That's a very interesting outlook on what needs to be done and how the different steps need to be taken simultaneously. I'll come back to the studios, and in the studios, the first question I'm going to ask is from the economic point of view from Shakil. Now, Shakil, first of all, they talk of food security, then eco-innovation, then adaptation. When it comes to a country such as Pakistan, that is a developing nation and it has its economic vows as well. And then we also know in different circuits that in the coming years, water is going to be a rare commodity. That is also something that we have talked about in this show. And across in the West, it is being said that water is going to be priced as twice as high in the years that are to come. How should Pakistan, as a country that is not only development but also mitigating the changes of climate change, should adapt to these different changes as well? Eco-innovation, economic policy, so as to adhere to the effects of climate change, and of course water as a commodity.
First of all, Umar, we need to come out of, especially our government need to come out of advocacy mode. What is happening for the few years? We are listening a lot of talks, a lot of you can fancy words and everything. That is advocacy stunts that are happening right now. We need to move toward the real policy prioritization. How to move? I give you two examples. One, 10 billion tree tsunami. It's a wonderful initiative because we need plantation.
Of course, when we need the trees.
But it is the job of the forest department. It's not a job of the whole government. You turn the climate change ministry and the forest ministry. One thing and second thing, from 2019, there was a climate smart agriculture program. The FAO, they have won the program from the Green Climate Fund. They have to be implemented in Pakistan. Last year in November, December, I was just figuring out what is the status. It was still not started the program because government was not providing their committed share to that program.
All right.
And today we are talking about climate change impacts on agriculture. And this is very superficial type of discussions we have. Manir can also add on that in the policy corridors. Look, do you know what would be the climate wheat production this year? It will decrease drastically. Why? Because wheat seed, they need it 10 to 12 days for the maturity. This year the heat wave come earlier than they had only the 4 days for the maturity. That's impacted the size of the grain. Productivity has gone drastically low. On other side, in the Ukraine and the Russian war, you don't have that wheat. You are moving toward a wheat crisis. One thing. Second, prioritization is a key because every point is important. For water we are talking about, mismanagement and the governance is the biggest issue in the water. I give you one example here. At the Kotri branch, on annual basis we need a flow of 8.6 MAF. Do you know what we are giving there? 31 MAF. That means we are wasting 23 MAF almost every year. And then still in March and April and May, there is no water at the Kotri branch. Because we are not building the dams. We are fighting over the dams. From since the 90s onward, Pakistan has lost $200 billion due to the water wastage. In the form of the floods, we could not store that water and we could not do anything. We are just debating here. So should we build the dam? Should we do that? Should we do that? Come on.
We need to translate that into action. I mean,
action. And when we talk about the climate change, you don't have any climate smart agriculture program. And you are claiming you are a climate change country, agriculture based country. You have climate, food security and research ministry, you have the climate change ministry, you have so many programs and everything is, so everybody, you talk to even to the street vendor, he will tell you climate change have impact on the agriculture. We don't want to listen from this from the government side.
Exactly.
We want to see where is your priority. Your priority is from the NDC. You are committing the 50% reduction GHG emission. Do you have the capacity to invest $15 billion in the next 10 years? You are begging the country, one country to other countries to give us the $3 billion. So you have to be the very focused
and very realistic.
Very realistic. Second thing, you have to devise policy which is according to your need. I gave one quote from President Xi Jinping. China is the leading country in the world right now to invest on the energy, clean energy, climate change. If whole resources of the world can pool their resources, their investment is more. China is leading. China is also putting more money than whole of the world. President Xi Jinping gave a very beautiful sentence. He said, we need to create a balance between ambitions of mitigation, means GHG emissions, and the living needs of the people and livelihood of people. Why? Because you need the support of the community and the people. If their livelihoods are on stake, if they are going for the starvation, they will never cooperate with you for any climate action or for any environmental action. So you need to be very clear what you want.
There needs to be a very clear policy. This is what
and
I understand.
Prioritization list.
Yes.
First, food, agriculture, because you have 44% population directly related to agriculture, labor force. If you go for the indirect, through the textile industry, leather industry and the other industries, it is more than 70% labor force is engaged related to the agriculture. If you are saving the agriculture, that means you are saving the economy. But what is happening right now here in Pakistan, a donor comes They give us some fancy slogans. We follow that and we forget what we need. And what third thing, what resources we have, we need to be spent very carefully. Why? Because from the global community you will not get the money. Why? As I mentioned in my opening remarks, there is an investment gap of 5.3 trillion. They are not able to invest in their own. How they will give you the money? Third thing, for attracting the money from the Green Climate Fund, we have to establish our national entity. Still we are not able to establish.
So many questions, so
And
many
last
questions.
question which I want to put, previous government, they took a very good initiative to create the Prime Minister Climate Change Authority. And it was according to the mandate, it had to meet every year. In the last 3.5 years, it never met.
So I mean, that is the main issue. What I understand from it all is that the policies are made, but the policies are never applied in principle.
No, the policy are not made which we required. We
And-
don't have the adaptation policy till today.
All right.
And plan.
So Munir Saab, adaptation policy, why don't we have one till today? Secondly, when we talk of climate change, smart agriculture program, why don't we have a proper one that caters to the needs of the agricultural community, whether it be in the big villages or in the cities?
First of all, as I agree to Ramesh Saab, he very rightly mentioned that we don't have a list of priorities. One. Secondly, the missing link is we could not mainstream climate into different government departments. We cannot integrate our approaches. The third thing, financing, of course, like we are short of financing, but it's the matter of management of finances. We have ample funds at least to start with right implementation plans.
But Munir Saab, start it, this is what we are trying to understand is, it's excellent, as Shakil said, that we are all talking together, we are highlighting the issues, we are highlighting it, but why aren't we putting them in action? Why isn't are the right people listening to it and said, oh, okay, this is the issues, these are the issues, and then we need to put them.
Every government is in advocacy mode.
Yeah.
And they engage the
He's very
advocacy
right.
people.
We
Not
need
the
action
doers.
plans. We need action plans. We need to mainstream and integrate climate action into each and every project that we develop in our planning department.
Integrate climate plans. I'll ask the question to Shafqat Aziz Saab. When you talk of integrating climate plans, when we talk of advocacy mode of the governments that has been very, how should I say, highlighted in, more than once by Shakil Rame, how can we put things into action? Are we going to wait for the things to really go from bad to worse in the different communities in Pakistan before the different departments spring into action?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's time to act more than rather than focusing on just old jargons and policy things. I would cite just a couple of examples. PPF has just piloted a Balochistan water strategy project in Pakistan, largest province area-wise. And it was about smart water management practices and shifting toward drought and heat-resistant crops. So a lot of work was done. We took about local land departments, agriculture departments, farmers, and after a lot of discussion, we introduced climate friendly crops, heat and water resistant crops, and especially we have not only that crop, but we have installed extracting plant for olive in Balochistan. It is connected with not only providing alternate solutions to local farmers, but connecting to their livelihoods. That is the more important thing. Now, another example I would cite from Swabi, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, where we have introduced tunnel farming, where in district that was water stopped, and that tunnel farmer is now adding choices to farmers. Now they can produce. They are producing and exporting many of their produce and having a handsome earning as well. So it's time to act on ground. Now we know to reach out to communities and need to assess and map out their genuine issues, genuine demands, and help out them with capacity building, expertise, right expertise, and enable them to have a good livelihood and not only contribute into eco-friendly agriculture practices and adapt to new realities. That is what I would
All right.
say. I took
Adapt to new
time.
realities and capacity building and expertise. This is something that is very important, and of course, whether it be climate change or any or the environment protection or how to alleviate the effects, this is something that is of primordial importance. Thank you very much, Shafqat Aziz Sahab. Ali Taqi Sheikh Sahab, if you could kindly put your camera on because we might not be able to see you as we speak. If you can hear us, if you could just holler a little bit and say. We would like to understand also through this discussion, through the policy making, capacity building, and all the rest that we've discussed during the course of the show. Why are things not being put into action? Why is there not a war footing when it comes to environment and climate change related issues? All right, Ali Taqi Sheikh Sahab is not with us apparently, so I'll ask the same question, and I'll ask this question to the both of you, starting from Munir Sahab and ending with Shakil Rami Sahab. Yes.
Basically, of course, climate change is a global phenomena, but we need to come up with some domestic and local practices. What matters? That is, we are most vulnerable to inefficiency and some corrupt practices as well. And those corrupt practices or inefficiency because of two reasons. One, we undermine the issue. Secondly, lethargy that we have as in our bureaucracy or those who are responsible to implement it. And another thing, we mostly believe in cosmetic measures. For example, that as Ramesh mentioned, that 10 billion tree tsunami, and everyone was engaged in, though it was the core task of forest department. But that is one part of the ministries and provinces. But the entire government, and another thing, we are very short-sighted. And for example, we launched a housing sector, with all the facilities and with all the incentives. But we did not take care of where these housing societies are being developed. Most of the agricultural lands are, they are grabbed, and they are like their use has been changed too. And already we are very inefficient in developing our climate smart agriculture. And we are decreasing the cultivated land as well. And again, like if we have so many, several millions of new houses, where their waste would go. And besides
proper
that,
waste management policy as well.
And
that is
we don't
something
have, even in Islamabad, the people have statistics at least 20-30% or more garbage is not being collected and disposed of accordingly. In the history of Islamabad, we cannot have our landfill site or other waste mechanism or waste segregation mechanisms in Islamabad. If this is the situation in Islamabad, then what we can talk about the mega cities and
the other areas. Last comment from you, Shakil, and that concerns, I understand where you come from. I've understood also the way you've brought about the issues that pertain to the governance and that pertain to the implementation of the right policy that have to be put into proper documentation before they are applied as well. Action is the key word here. But if I were to ask you, how to build about that action on a war footing. How would you do it if you were given the task of handling the environment of Pakistan and handling climate change in Pakistan? How would you go about it? What would be the first 3, 4, 5 issues that you would tackle?
First, which I will do, I will curb all the advocacy campaigns. Because you need actions. Enough has been said. With whom you want to do the advocacy? You are preaching to the converters.
Yeah.
One thing, and second thing, action for the agriculture. Need to adopt the new varieties, bring the new species for the animals who can sustain the these heat waves and the shocks, who can sustain the flood shock, the crops which can sustain the flood shock, and they are the varieties we can benefit.
Of course.
One thing, second thing, we can bring the investment, research and development for that, and there is a hard you can say opportunity is available. Under CPEC, we have to say China has agreed to build the 8 research center for agriculture.
All right.
Modern, not that it's like the outdated. I would request to just start it.
All right.
Yeah.
So I think at the end of the day, I mean, we are a bit short of time, or else I would have taken your question as well. The issue remains that there is policy making. The policy making has not been updated. There is policy making, but that policy has not been put into action. There is policy, but then as far as the donors are concerned, as Shakil has pointed out and Munir Saab as well, the donors are attracted to it, but we do not react accordingly in order to satisfy them as to how Pakistan is going about as far as different kinds of mitigation of climate change are concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll end on the note of Pakistan being an agrarian society and a state where agriculture is of primordial importance. Nevertheless, what needs to be done on a war footing, and I repeat here, this is the third time I'm repeating this key word, war footing, all those changes, all those policies that have been put on paper by the different governments, they need to be put into action without any further hindrance before it's way too late. We are seeing the effects right now in Pakistan, we are seeing the effects in Karachi, in Lahore, and waste management. There are so many types of issues that pertain to environment, that pertain to climate change, and we need to simultaneously tackle them before it's way too late. It's time really for all of us, including myself and my guests, to wake up and join hands to combat this. I hope we do that. I hope we manage to sustain Pakistan as a country where there's a lot of greenery, where there is less of flooding, where there's less of earthquakes and less of mitigation from the climate change. Allah Hafiz.